All right, welcome to the newest video lecture. Um, Beyond Basic Reporting News You Have to Find, Chapter 8. The last lecture was on the basics of reporting, some more basic ideas of things you would be covering, things that you'll normally get assigned to a lot of the times. So get used to that. Lots of meetings, press conferences, stuff like that. But these, and they have their own flow of how they usually work. But now there's other stories. All right, the stories that aren't just of events. There's bigger stories. Lots of cases, stories that came could come from previous stories you may have covered. Things that may have not been related to at all what you had been doing, and you found a new story. Or there's other details within a story. And this basically is telling you to pay attention. Pay attention to the little things. And that's kind of like what the descriptive opening was about. And when you were describing really, really minute details, well, when you're out there, you're going to have to pay attention to very, very, very minute details, listening to everything you see or is said, and that leads to more depth to your stories, more possible people to talk to within stories, and that's how real good journalism works, is digging and digging. And in this day and time, there's not a whole lot of digging going on because of a variety of different reasons. So let's kind of get into what we're going to be doing, and away we go. All right, some objectives today. You're going to see some elements of everyday life as potential stories, kind of what I was just mentioning. You're going to understand what beat reporting is. Beat reporting is focusing on certain aspects of, and you're becoming an expert on that, and we'll get deeper into definition on that. Engaging in research, source development, follow-up. The 3 interview phases when we're talking about profiles, and understanding the role of watchdog. Something that I feel has gone down in recent years because of money and other reasons, and lack of staff, and a whole plethora of reasons why we don't get nearly as much of that as we used to in the past, and it shows. All right, let's get going. All right. So we've talked about the journalism in a nutshell, like the last chapter. Some stories you find, some stories find you. This chapter concerns the former. All right. The last one dealt with stories that you'll find you that you're pretty much assigned, and these are the things that you find. And this is the real good test of a journalist. You being able to think quickly in a situation. This goes also to critical thinking. We a lot of times in an effort to, I'm doing my job, we kind of get caught up in the job, and we don't, and maybe getting caught up in that story, and sometimes we forget that we have to keep going and keep paying attention to everything that's going on with these stories, because there's always a story somewhere, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. All right, how to find stories in everyday life. Open your eyes, your mind. You will find stories everywhere. So what do you mean by that? You're going to find that when you're going through and going to these stories, that you're going to be interviewing a lot of people. And when you're interviewing these people, when you're going to these places, you have to really pay attention to what is going on around you, to what is being said, to looking at, paying attention to what the person's wearing, seeing what is it about them, really really, really paying attention to minute details. A lot of times, especially now, people just kind of don't pay attention to anything. They don't look at details. And as a journalist, you can't do that because there's so many different stories. But just by meeting one person, there could be like 15 different stories just by meeting that one person. And if you're just doing the job that, oh, I'm just getting the story and asking the questions I need to get for that specific story, you're barely scratching the surface. There could be so many other uh, details in that person. We all have our own stories. We all have different levels to us. And there's some really great stories out there. And it's part of your responsibility to as a journalist, to find those stories. Because a lot of times it's, yeah, you're going to have lots of the meetings and stuff, but they kind of get a little boring. And the real meat and potatoes of this is the deeper stories. The deeper stories that really test you as a journalist and give a complete picture of certain stories. I mean, it's imperative to understand that. They say that, say you're covering um, the courts, maybe because that might be something that you do, and you go to the courts, and you're covering different court cases, crimes, whatever, and that's part of your normal routine. And but there's so many other stories than just those crime stories. I mean, if say because if you go into go to courts, what do they usually have there? They usually have screeners. They usually have the metal detectors, and with metal detectors, like, okay, what's being said, and with those metal detectors, because sometimes it could be long lines. Maybe there's only one working, and maybe people are complaining, oh, this used to go much faster when we had more available. Now the question is, a good reporter would say, why? Why is it taking so much longer? Do they not have the staffing? Was there an incident that caused them to limit it to one? There's so many other questions that can be asked because of that. And you could talk to maybe people before, like other staff members, or people might be here a lot of the time. Hey, this used to be different. Why was it different? I mean, there's so many questions to that. It's did budgetary concerns change it? Did they have to cut down staffing? Did they technology not work? Or is there? It's just to find out the answers. Maybe it's just a simple answer, but that one simple answer those answers might there might be a whole heck of a lot more. There might be a whole lot more levels to it, and which could become a much bigger story. And just by you being screened, going through the experience of go to the court and going through the metal detector, um, and really listening and paying attention to what things are going on, um, it brings up a whole other list of questions that can build into a new story. So that's what we're talking about. It's really paying attention when you're going through it. Don't get tunnel vision, right? You always have to be on, even when you're not actually reporting. And as you do it for a while, it becomes just part of your nature and part of who you are. And then even when you're on your own and just in a social situation, you probably won't be able to turn it off. But at first, you have to really start thinking deeper, and it takes some time to work on that. Just like working out anything, you got to work that out, and so it becomes easier and just second nature for you. Why? Because you have to be inquisitive. You want to be a journalist, you got to be inquisitive. You got to see things in more than just what is presented to you. You have to think at a different level. It's like, is there more of a story here? And it shouldn't. At first, it's probably going to be a little harder to figure it out, to think like that. But as you do it more and more, it's going to start hitting you, and you're not even going to think about it. Everything's going to be a story to you. You're always going to be looking around, paying attention to any given situation, listening, and seeing how things work, and that's a big part of this. So yeah, so stop tuning out. Like I said, you're gonna. It's easy to get tunnel vision in what you're doing. You have to pay attention, and especially in this day and time that we live in with social media and our headsets, and it's just easier to stay focused on what you're into, what you like. You can't just do that because you're not going to be able, you're limiting your scope, you're limiting your options to being a good journalist. You're limiting your sources. You're basically living in a box and looking through in your hand with a little hole at the end of it and looking at the world that way. That's not going to do you any good. It makes you feel comfortable, but it's about getting out of your comfort zone. It's forcing yourself to open your eyes. It's forcing yourself to really pay attention to what's going on around you. I see it all the time. People just, oh, got to get from point A to point B and just get done what I need to get done. And you can't do it. Good journalists, if you want to be a good journalist, you have to pay attention to all these things. If you don't, you're not going to be a good journalist. You're not going to, and it makes you more appreciative of life. It makes you a more complete person. Yeah, these technologies that we have has done some good things for us, but it's also made us hermits in a way. We're only going to look at what we want to look at and pay attention to what we retreat from life and retreat from other opportunities, learning more about more things and learning more about ourselves and developing more as complete human beings. So you gotta get out of just staying locked into what's comfortable for you, and then it's a big part. You gotta pay attention. Look for the simple things. It could be little thing. Not every story is going to be this monster story like, no, this person has a cure for cancer, or there's some revolutionary new thing. It's not going to be, everything's not going to be a monster story. There are so many different stories. They say there's a million stories in the naked city. It's an old television reference, but there really are. There's all these people out there, and we have all these different layers, and we all have histories. And sometimes you can see the histories in their faces, what they wear, on people's arms, jewelry that they wear. There's so many different things that just tell people who they are and show a history of that person, and we don't even realize it. It's for example, say you might be talking to a priest. Okay, yes, a priest, and they said he talked to a priest, and as you notice in your interview, it's like, oh, you see like a faded tattoo on there, and it was like a military tattoo. Well, there's a story in there. For priests, I mean, what did they do? That's a whole other lifetime before they became a priest. A very different life. It's paying attention to things like that. Also, look at things such as there was a example. They talked. He said there was a report done on ketchup. Think about all, and they always noticed how many different mustards there are. Which, for the record, I am not a fan of. We can talk about that in depth some other time, but there's really not that many different ketchups out there, and they did a whole story on that. Blue jeans, what's the little pocket with the tab in there for? It's just little things like that. Ever pay attention? Why is this that, and why is this way, and why do we call this that? No one ever really thinks about it, but it's still an interesting story. And part of what we do is being responsible and keeping truth to power and all that. But then there's lots of other stories that we tell that are just interesting. Where that we are storytellers, and part of that is research. And there's lots of, you can't tell me that you haven't had those times. And it's like, oh, why is this that way? Why does anyone call it this? And they're just interesting stories. And you can make something bigger on it. If you get enough out of that. Right. Then also following up properly. When you are doing events, going to this presser or this meeting and that meeting, we call it hit and run journalism. You go to your event, you cover the event, you go to the next event. Journalism is much more than that. And what we're talking about in this chapter and in this lecture is that it's much deeper. We're trying to find bigger stories. We're trying to find better stories. You've got to be able to look at the more than just coverage, what's going on there. There's different angles, and following up. You could be done with a certain story. Maybe you go to a city council meeting, which you may go to a lot of them, and they're talking about approving expansion in a park, or the new walkway, or new playground equipment, or something like that. And that's your story for the day, but then there might be more to that story. Okay, so they passed it. All right, so what are the next steps for that? So say it's the playground equipment. Who's gonna supply the playground equipment? Who's the contractor for that? What's their story? What's the deal? How much is it going to cost? What was estimated? How long is it going to take to get there? What's the plan for that? And then there might even be deeper stories. How did the bidding go for that? Was the bidding on that process for the new playground equipment? I know it seems silly, like playground equipment, but was the bidding on that up to snuff and legal? Or did some city council person's second cousin twice removed get that? I mean, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but those are a whole set of stories. And then you're dealing with that, then you're talking about possible city corruption. Maybe there was some benefit for that city council member, and then it becomes an even bigger story. Out of what? Out of what was nothing more than some city council meeting approving a expansion of playground equipment at a park, right? And that could possibly spur on a whole other set of much bigger and more important issues dealing with political corruption. And is it just that person, or is it a bigger network of corruption in there? Yes, this is what means to be a journalist. Paying attention, really getting your mind. You always have to be thinking. You should be absolutely exhausted. Absolutely exhausted. It's already exhausting just covering what you're covering. But mentally, you should be absolutely exhausted because your brain should be just going. There's more. There's more here. There's more here. Maybe there's not. Maybe there's not more to it. Maybe it is just simple things. But I mean, it's and follow up is important with these stories. There's more layers, and that's where you get your stories. Lots of times it can be just from the mundane things that you go through, or you just get people that you might meet at these places. Always, but that it's upon you to be able to follow up properly on these stories and do these things and ferret these stories out, mine these stories out. It's a lot of work, but if this is what you want to do, you have to know this is what's going to happen. And wonder more. Don't be afraid to ask why. Kids are always asking, why? Why? Why is this? Why is the sky blue? Why? Because it is. Why? Because of the reflection of with the sun, and we see this and that and the water, and it's why? And they just keep. So you've got to basically keep asking why, because the more you ask why, the more you find out more. You have to kind of have also a little bit of kid in you, and not to be afraid to ask that. You have to get beyond, once again, your comfort zone. If you are someone who's big about your comfort zone, and this isn't for you. It's really not for you. You have to be willing to push the envelope. You have to be willing. You don't have to be a jerk, but you have to push the envelope and keep asking why. And that's another aspect. A lot of people are afraid to do that. Plus, with dwindling numbers at all these places, because trying to save money and technology's made things easier, so they have less people doing this. We're finding less and less good journalism happening. So it's important. You need to wonder. Keep wondering. Never stop wondering. Keep asking why. That's what a good journalist does, and that's how you're going to find more stories, and that's how you're going to be a better journalist. That's when you're going to do less of the meetings and more of your own deeper stories. When you show you can do that, that's what a good that's where we find good journalism. Now we're going to be talking about beat reporting, and what beat reporting is. You're looking for people who are going to focus on certain aspects of certain stories, and they're going to focus specifically on those. Beat reporting. You're basically kind of becoming an expert in ways because you are always covering those specific aspects. It could be facts, or policies, or area, or whatever it is. And you become very, very well versed on that because you're around it all the time. And you're the person that when you get your own beat, you've been entrusted with a pretty big responsibility because you're supposed to be the person that knows everything that's going on in whatever that topic is. And so that's part of the industry. Yeah, you're going to do general assignments. You're going to do a lot of general assignments, going from one thing to another when you first start. But as you get on in your career, they're probably going to want you to start really focusing on specific things. And there's a few different types of beats, and we're going to talk about them. Okay. All right. First one you got is thematic beats. It could be education, it could be sports, it could be even deeper subject matter. You could go in, if not just be sports, it could be boys' high school sports, girls' high school sports. It could be, it may even go deeper, depending on how many people are working at your outlet, how much money they have to spread out to different people. It could be a specific sport, maybe a specific football coverage of a given area. It could be any number of different things. It could be education. It could be government. It could be or maybe it's just City Hall, and where I come from Harrisburg. We talk about City Hall, and that could mean the governor. The mayor. And then the city council, and because it's in the same City Hall holds both, so everything that's going on at City Hall. So that's one thing. And if it is education, is it K through 12? Is it higher education? Is it all education? These are general, specific, but just things that you would be focusing on. I know someone who was like at Fox News. He was the religion and faith-based reporter, and she talked about all types of different religions and faiths all across the world, and what people believed, and how the religion worked, and in the bigger picture. And so you'll find different people doing different things. Then there's geographic beats, cities, neighborhoods. When I think of geographic beats around here in the Lancaster area, where I've been for the last almost 13 years now. We're going on 13 years very, very soon. WGAL, the highest rated TV station in our market, they have the York beat reporter, the York County beat reporter, Ed Weinstock. He's this grizzled old, he's been doing it long before I was in it. and he's always been the York County beat reporter. He does everything York County. Doesn't get out anywhere outside of York County. York County's got a good bit of area, quite a bit goes on there. He is Ed Weinstock, grizzled old guy. Been doing it for years. Every time you go to a store, you know he's going to be there if it's in York County. Ed Weinstock. And he's still doing it to this day. He'll probably do it till his last dying breath will probably be on a story about York County. And his death will be would be a monstrous story at York County. Obviously, he won't be able to cover it himself, but I would think that maybe he might have already created that obit. Just to let you know, we do create obits in TV news for people we know who might not be with us much longer and they're of a celebrity nature. Yeah, it's kind of gruesome, but if you know it's going to happen, so when it does happen, it's already done, and maybe they just have to add a little something at the end. But it doesn't take too long to break it out and be able to air it. So just a little bit of news there. Kind of gruesome, but it's part of it. But yeah, so the geographic beats. It's just finding. It could be a city, it could be a county, it could be a certain neighborhood, depending on how big the area that you are at, and you focus on everything and anything within that area. So that could be crime, that could be meetings, that could be corruption, that could be good news, it could be parades, it could be barbecues or festivals, or just everything and anything that is in that geographic area. It could be good news, it could be bad news, it could be weather. I mean, whatever. It's kind of like a general assignment reporter, but a general assignment reporter for a specific area. And then you get to really know the people in that area very, very well, because you're constantly seeing them over and over and over and over again. And so that's one kind of beat that any one of you could be working on. So it's and it all depends. Depends on the outlet that you're going to, their needs, what they cover, how they cover it. Usually find in a lot of them they do have certain geographic beats. That's one of the more basic beats that's out there. And then they've got conceptual beats. This is a little more abstract. Sometimes things don't fit in either in geographic or thematic beats. Sometimes it's data driven and dealing with things such as multiculturalism. And just it's much more abstract. There's a lot of data in there. And sometimes it can be things such as you could be taking things from other beats and going deeper into it, like political donors, looking at examining political donations from government, and then you're digging deeper into that. But there's bigger issues within that. It could be gender gaps for advancement in work or pay. There's so many different. It's because it's not necessarily. It's they're topics that are bigger picture, and they don't. It's different. It's different. It's not geographic. It's not thematic. It's dealing with issues and things of that nature that don't fit within the other two, but they might come from what you do in conceptual might come from a geographic beat or might come from a thematic beat. So if you've got people who are doing the thematic and geographic beats, and you're in this conceptual beats aspect, you'll get some information from them, and then you'll take it to a whole other level and bring a different angle to it and a different scope to it. And it is definitely harder to explain, but these are the more bigger picture concepts. So yeah, that's why it's called conceptual beats. Ideas, thoughts, issues on a more societal basis. That's the best way I can do that and explain that. So you got your different types of beats, and chances are you'll probably be doing some sort in one or another eventually if you get into journalism and understand that. All right. So when you do first get started, just know that when you get started anywhere, especially if you're going to be doing beats, any type of beats, try and talk to the person who did whatever it is you're doing, be it geographic, conceptual, or thematic beats wise. If you have a chance to talk to the person who did it before you, talk to them. What are they looking for? What goes on there? Who should I talk to? So they're the one who's been following all this, and so they would have a good idea because they're the one who's been covering this. What are the big stories coming up? They're going to know that. They know they have a good pulse on what's going on around the area, what they've been covering. So that's always important. You have a big part of this is getting your sources, and a monster part of that is talking to the people who covered it before you did. And also stories that need following up. How many stories you're going to be doing? Sometimes stories they just seem to build on other stories, or something hasn't been answered quite yet, but you're still creating and producing other stories. But you always have to keep in the back of your mind, or written down somewhere, or whatever, however your mind works and how you remember things. Talk to them. What are some things that need to be followed up on? Because they're the ones who've been covering this, and now you're the person that's going to needing to just jump into the pool. Just jump into the pool, wash yourself within it, become completely enveloped by it, and that's going to be your life for the next however long you're supposed to be doing that. And the only way you can do that is by completely, diving in and just becoming all about that. And things that, and then also ask the predecessor, what were you hoping to do? What was the next thing you never got to do? But you think is a good story. You just, between scheduling and other stories and things that didn't go the right way. What are the things that you wish you got to? And that's going to happen. Because there's only certain. Plus, you remember, it's only a certain amount of hours in a day, a certain amount of time to get each of your stories done. And even if you're doing all your due diligence, if you're doing a good job and doing the whole beat reporter and following through with all the steps that you're supposed to be doing and thinking with an open mind and always looking and paying attention and doing those things to build upon stories, there's going to be things that pop up that, I never got to this, or I never got to that story. Listen to your predecessor. Any problems on the beat. Sometimes there's certain things that you're going to be doing over in meetings, certain times. That might be a problem in something with the meeting, or maybe they're always late, or maybe when you're dealing with someone, some people are, that's part of their job when you're covering them, but they might not be that friendly. They're not that easy to work with. This is the time when you're dealing with this question, because remember, we're people. You're dealing with people, and you have to get used to dealing with people, because they have a job and you have a job, and sometimes they're not easy to work with. Maybe there's some aspect of covering a certain area. If you're covering a certain area, maybe you don't want to be. If you're in a certain area, you don't want to be at a place past a certain time where you could get hurt. It might not be the greatest area. So that's something you have to pay attention to. Maybe there's some person out there that they know of. Stay away from this person. They're not, though they might portray themselves as being a good source, they're really not. And then that leads to, who are the good sources? Who are the people that that you can work with, that you can talk to, and know when it depends. Say you're at City Hall and you might know someone who works for the mayor, or even someone who's just kind of there, and they're good with talking to you about certain sources. But that comes with time, and you build trust with people. So it's who's good to talk to about certain things. And these are all things. Right? These are all things that you're asking the person that did before you. And then where should I spend the bulk of my time? Where is there a lot of good stories? Where do you find you yourself? Where you wind up being a lot of the time when you're getting some really good stories. You learn a lot about from the people who were doing it before, especially something like this, especially if you're new and you've never done that. Now that you might be lucky from the standpoint where the person that was doing this beat just got transferred over or wanted to go to a different part of that media outlet. So they're readily available right there for you. Yeah, they're going to be busy. Remember that. They're going to have work to do too. They're going to be busy too. But at least they would be right there. Maybe they wind up just leaving and going to a different job or just retire or something like that. So that'll make things harder. But before they leave, or if you're there, ask them these things. Because they're the person that's been doing this the whole time, and because they've been hopefully been doing it right, they've dove in, and that's been their life, and they know it upside down, left, and sideways, and now it's your job to know it upside down, left, and sideways. Other aspects of what you should do when you're getting started: read or sometimes watch the station. You can get a good idea. Look at their archives. How have they covered things? What have they covered? Where have they taken it? How far have they taken? How many other stories might have come from certain coverage of certain things? And that goes with if you're at a television station as well. Pay attention to the archives. And especially now, it's easier now than ever from a standpoint of the computer. And when you're there, you're going to have an endless archive. You're working there of video and scripts, and from that standpoint, and then I'm sure you'll have stuff in when you're a newspaper. Once again, they'll probably have video, and they'll have articles, and it's going to be that venue. It's going to be that newspaper. It's going to be that television station. So you're going to have access to all that. It's your job, okay, when you first get started. Once again, you're going to dive into it. Is a lot of work? Yeah. It's not all glory. I mean, if you're a good journalist, it's not a lot of time. It's not about glory. It's just doing a good job telling a story and stories that matter and have impact upon the people that are your audience. And part of that is you doing your homework. Yeah, homework doesn't end when you graduate. It just gets started. You've just gotten started, and then you're gonna, believe it or not, when you get out there, you're gonna be having even more quote unquote homework a lot of the time when you're doing this. So you're gonna hope back. Oh, remember when I was doing those assignments, and I hated them when college and high school. Well, you're gonna have a whole other level when you're doing this. Also, talk to your boss when you first get started, and for whatever you do, what kind of breakdown of work am I going to be expected to do? Is it going to be a lot of meetings? Is it going to be a beat? And in that beat, what are some of the things that you would prefer me to be covering? How should I be covering it? What's the best way should I approach this? From what you've seen, what you want me to do, and what you think best serves. See, a good way to do this is not only to ask what they think of personally, but would best serve our viewers, our readers, whatever. Because then you're showing that you care about that audience, you care about that, and they're going to be more open about that. So, where do you expect me to what are your expectations of me and how I cover things? What are the typical turnarounds, development of a story? And you're going to get different answers each time. But it's important to talk to your boss and sit down with them, and especially when you first get started, because then you have a good idea, and then it shows that you care about doing a good job, and then that gives them hope that you're really taking this seriously, you want to be a good member of the team, and they'll be more willing to work with you. Remember, do it in a professional manner. Always do it in a professional manner because you want let them know I want to do the best job I can here. And how do I, what's your advice for me and how I handle things? And they'll take time. At least good bosses will. Um, so, all right, all right, all right. How do you build your beat? All right. One of the first things that you do. Yes, you're gonna be on the phone a bit, and you're gonna be making emails, but that's just a very, very small percentage of it. I can't tell you how many times assignment editors who are looking for stories at the TV station, they'd be on the phone. Hey, Hull City Hall, is there any news there today? Is there anything there we should be part of or know about? And most of the time it's no. Sometimes, hey, yeah, we got something. That is such a small percentage of it. Um, so that's usually some of the biggest mistakes when you first get in there. Yeah, you can do your introductory emails and stuff like that, but there's something to be said about talking to people. But this goes back to changing communication. My two C words that are important. Well, here's the communication part. Make yourself known. Put yourself out there. Get out of your comfort zone. If you would have told me when I was a kid that I'd be going out there and interviewing these people and talking and being in front of a class and talking with you, I see you're insane. You're absolutely insane. And I had to force myself. I got into the industry and I had to go out and interview people um, and so it was, you have to really get out of your comfort zone. Oh, but I don't like them. Like, then maybe you don't want to be a journalist because you have to be willing to go out there and talk to people you've never talked to, don't know at all, and you have to find in yourself to be able to just sometimes go up cold and talk to someone. And so it's because remember you're going to be going to cover these places and covering these events, and you're going to get information from people, right? And you're going to be seeing these people quite a bit. So that goes into building sources as well. It's when you're doing that, when you're talking to these people, you're going to be building sources, and you're also going to be understanding that you're going to be building relationships, and you're going to see these people time and again and time and again. You're going to be getting more information, and as you navigate your job, you're going to start learning where, not only from personal relationships, but certain databases or places or websites or whatever the case may be, or where you have to go for certain pieces of information that are specific to that area, or for certain things. That comes with time, and that's where you start to really build your sources, and that's where you get all these stories, and how to build stories, because you need to know who is dependable, who is not, what is dependable, what is not, how that works, and it comes with time, trust, and building trust with some of these people that you're working with, and but it comes with time, and but they know not every reporter is at a place forever. They people go from one thing to another quite a bit, but it still means that you don't have the same trust that previous person had with these sources. So you have to build it on your own, and hope that the person that was doing your job before was trustworthy. So that will make your job easier. If they were a good journalist and they built those sources, it'll be easier. I'm not saying it's going to be super easy, but it'll be easier. And if the person wasn't, then it'll probably be a little bit harder. But then if you're a good journalist and you're good, trustworthy, then you have to build that upon yourself and do it in your own way. But that's part of getting the stories, getting those sources, maintaining those relationships. And remember, a lot of times these sources, people in these places, they have a whole bunch of people that are also reporters at different venues of different formats. So they're dealing with them, they're dealing with you, and it's going to take time to build that trust, But that's upon you and how well you do it. Also, gathering documents. It's once again research, 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 and these documents are going to be important. Be actual, be actual documents or electronic documents that you're going to be getting to, because you're a journalist, and these are the things that give you the proof of what other people are, what they're saying is true or is untrue. This is doing your work. It is trying to find out, because people are going to say a whole lot of things to you and give you information, and it might be right and it might not be right, but it's your responsibility to check up on that. And they're going to be getting lots of information, lots of stats, lots of things that are going out from many different things. And by you gathering all this information, it's important to do your homework. Once again, more homework. Why? Because you have to know what you're talking about, and you need the proof either way, either to confirm what these people are saying, or maybe it's inconsistent, and then that's your responsibility to say, hey, you said this, but in this document, in this, that directly relates to what you said, it wasn't quite right. What's your reaction to that? Because that's what a good journalist does. So that's all part of it. All of this has to do with building stories. So you have to pay attention to all that. Okay, here are 3 big tips for succeeding on a beat. Okay, first one: don't diss. Don't diss the desk jockeys. Support staffers know their stuff. All right, don't get all high and mighty because, I'm a journalist and I know this, that, and the other thing. You should always remain humble, confident, but humble. Okay, confident, and realize that these people that are doing these jobs, such as secretaries or desk people at police stations, or people who have jobs of this nature in other organizations, they are basically the lifeblood of those organizations. They could be somebody's assistant. They know what's going on. They're on the inner. They're the inner circle. A lot of times, these people are the ones who are actually running. Without them, things would come to a screeching halt, and they tend to know a heck of a lot more about what's going on. Okay, so do not disrespect them. Don't think you're gonna make a massive mistake if you look down towards these people, like even custodians. They know what's going on before anybody else does. So anybody and everybody can be a huge, massive source of inner workings of what's going on in a place, and they are lots of times the people who are running these places behind the scenes. So it's making sure you're paying attention to who these people are and the importance of the role they play, because they know exactly. They have their finger on the pulse of everything. So these are some of the biggest sources that you get some real inside information on that you wouldn't normally think. So yeah, so be nice, because you're a human being. It's not. Don't think so highly of yourself. Well, I'm a reporter. Well, yeah, you're a reporter. You're supposed to be humble. Tell the story. You're gonna get a heck of a lot more from people who are in positions like this than you would ever realize. Lots of times, other people regard these people. You have a good relationship with them, you'll get so much more information from them. Get close, but not too close. Okay. Yes, you're going to have good, close relationships with these, because you're constantly working with these people, seeing them time and again, as you're building these relationships with your sources, and have a friendly relationship. But remember, you're not friends. So that means sometimes if something affects them personally, and it's something that needs to still get out, you got to remember, you're friendly with them. It's not personal, but you're not their friend. You're friendly, you're cordial, you're a decent human being, but you're not friends. And there's certain bits of information you have to put a line there. There always has to be a line that you don't get too close with them, because then that takes away from stories that need to need to be told. It kind of goes into conflict of interest as well, if you think about it from a certain point of view. So yeah, you're going to be friendly. You're going to get it's hard. It's hard to figure out because you are dealing with them all the time. You are friendly with them, and you get along with them. And you have to remember, you still have a job you have to do, and you've got to get that story out, and do it in a professional manner. It's because it's not personal. And then let someone know if you are burned out. This industry, this race will wear on you, especially if you're in a beat and you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. You're getting so deep in all these things. It gets to a point where it's just you can't take it anymore. And it's time to move on. And we talked about, well, the person that you're supposed to talk to, the previous person who was on your beat, that might have happened to them too. It can wear on you. Some people can keep doing it forever. Sometimes it's only a certain amount of time. Once you feel, I can't do this anymore. We're not talking 2 or 3 months. It could be years. Honestly, it could be. But it can wear on you, and it might be time for that change. So it's this industry can wear on you. You're going at a breakneck speed, and you're doing things and rushing here, rushing there, getting things done, and it's not normal. Plus, you're doing a lot of things during times that most people aren't working, and working holidays, and working all these other times, and when you're doing that beat, like anything, it can just wear on you, and it's time to possibly go to another part of to cover something else to get away from all that. And it happens. And if they're a good outlet, they'll say, yeah, after a while, you want to change. They know because they've been through it too. How to refresh beat reporting. Always keep in contact with your stories. Now, what's that mean? Every time you're working on a story, you want to stay in touch with them. It's not just, oh, I'm done with them. I don't need them anymore. Because especially if what you did might have had some sort of positive impact, or there's something happened, and because of you did that story, and you don't want to necessarily forget it. It's like, say you helped a housing project or something that had some issues with bad service, or it was turning into a real not nice place to live, and because of your reporting, they were forced to change it up. And they might have had their day in court or whatever the case may have been, and they're ordered to change certain things. Go back and check like 3-4 months, and pay attention to what the rule was and how long they had to take care of it. And because if they didn't take care of it, there's another story into itself. Plus, these are people, you're trying to help them, but you're still helping them, because lots of times stories just kind of like fade away. People forget about them because they're on to the next story, and it's important to keep in contact with these people, because they could have new stories for you, other layers to it, new stories from the old stories, and a lot of times you're dealing with a lot of the same people. They have lots of things to tell you. I told you, they have usually on the pulse of a lot of different things. And when you're on a beat, it depending on the type of beat you're going to be covering, it's going to determine how often you should go and talk to certain sources. Sometimes you may check back with them once or twice in a single day. Maybe it's every couple weeks you might go and check back with them. It could be checking back on what the stories there. And as I said before, revisiting older stories, making sure things are as the way they're supposed to be. People are doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's new stories with that. And then connecting the dots. A lot of people don't seem to like to connect the dots these days. They just go on, do their story, and that's it. And that's for a lot of different reasons, but it's being able, it goes back to paying attention. And how does one thing lead to another, lead to another, lead to another? So when you're connecting the dots, you're creating the picture of the story, and that's the whole point. As as you're in a place and working a certain beat, um, you start to see things more broadly. You start seeing those little things, the day in, day out of how things are working. Um, but from that, you can get even like smaller stories because there's big stories and there's smaller stories. Your job is to ferret out and dig out all types of stories, and it's that's making sure you're paying attention, and so you might notice certain things that are happening. Say you're in the book, it tells about being an education reporter, and during your time there, you're noticing certain school district that over a few years or so, that there's lots of retirements, and you have all these younger people coming in. But when these younger people coming in, they're they start and then they're not there for all that long. Why is that? What's wrong? What's going on? Especially something with teaching in that case. You try to get a job, you try to stay there for as long as you can, and build tenure and all that kind of stuff. And there's a bigger story there. There's probably possibly a bigger story there. So you have to like, hey, what's going on? This is weird. Or this is strange. And why is this happening? And it's your job to ask the question once again. Why? Connect the dots to bring in that bigger picture. And then it's dealing with personality profiles. Lots of times you're dealing with people of sometimes they're famous and sometimes they're not necessarily famous, but they have an interesting story to them, or tell a bigger, or can tell doing a personality profile could tell a bigger story of a bigger issue. And part of that is there's a lot when you're talking about a certain personality, be it a celebrity or a common person who's got like maybe a job that is extraordinary, or maybe it's not an extraordinary job, but because you're doing their job, it tells a bigger story overall. And some things you should understand about when you're interviewing these people, the process of doing it, what you should be asking, but things that you should be paying attention to when you're doing an in-depth personality profile, because it's going to take a little while to really pay attention and get different angles of stories. It's more than just talking to them the one time. Okay, I'm done. But you want to. This is supposed to be a profile, and the only way you can get a profile is talk to not only that person, probably multiple times, but other people within their life from different aspects of their life, not just the superficial, but the things that make these people who they are, and who we become is from a lot of the experiences that we have, the people that we meet, the people that teach us along the way, who have mentored us, who've seen us progress. If you're going to do a personality profile, you got to talk to those people as well, because it gives you a pathway to the person that they are at that given time. We don't just pop out this way. There's many layers to it. There's many experiences. There's many people along the way, and many things that you learn that mold you into who you become. And that's the same with any personality, person out there, famous or not famous. And when you're doing a personality profile, that's the things you have to pay attention to. You have to understand people enjoy reading about lives of other people, especially from if they're a celebrity or just a really interesting person with a real interesting job. That's why we do these stories about them. People want to know about what's going on and what makes these people tick and where do they come up with. Maybe it's something creative that they do, or a storyteller, or a musician, or whatever the case of their profile is. That what makes them tick, and people are interested in that because they like some aspect of performance or whatever they are, if they're an athlete or whatever the case is, or a politician, or just some person that's a great teacher, or some person that's been a civil servant for so long, a certain job, and is quite the personality, does things in a certain way, and could be a person of local prominence that is a mainstay of that area, but they have a real interesting story. People want to know about these people, who they are, what made them good at what they do, or is how they are. And every person does have a story. We have lots of layers to us. And it's being able, when you're focusing on these people, the only way that you can do that is by doing it in lots of different, finding lots of different people for that. First interview, and there's basically a few different stages. First interview, when you're sitting down with this person you're profiling, you want to get kind of a rough sketch of who that person is. All right. Before you go in there, you do your research, basic research on them, as much as you can. So it'll help you form questions about who this person is, and then you want to know, to show that you're prepared, that you know something about this person going in, and it'll help you come up with more general topics such as education, background, experiences, general interests, and it basically shows some of the basic stuff that you're first starting off with, and try to very broad, open-ended questions. You don't want to get too intricate. Any questions that you ask, listen. All right, what they're talking about, and they might start talking about certain things, and that's where Watch for Small Moments comes from. And they might talk about experiences that they had in the past, like it might be some celebrity or some athlete or whatever, and they mention, I remember growing up, and we always used to go to this, or maybe it's an athlete. No, this coach really showed me the importance of, he's a baseball player, of hitting the cutoff man, and he was an integral part of how I approach this, and that when say that the baseball player, hypothetical baseball player, says this stuff, and see if that person's still around, and then what you're going to do is you're going to talk to them, because sometimes when when people reminisce about things, sometimes they misremember it, and that actually does happen. I know it sounds like a joke, misremember. It just sounds like somebody's lying, like a politician would say that. But sometimes we do. I remember things a little differently, and then when you talk to that other person, they might remember it a little differently. But also, it gives you a new angle into that person, so you're trying to listen to what they're saying when they're reminiscing about how this person got to where they are going, or where they are, or whatever the case is. Like I said, there's lots of people along the way, and every time they mention something, or maybe you bring up something like, who would you say helped you on your way to where you are? What are some experiences that you've had? You can, and that will show you, that will bring you to other people to talk to. So that gives you even more sources, because you're trying to get a complete picture of this person. And part of that is that, and they'll know a good for development of that. And then it can also bring up some new things of things going on now. It's maybe there's something that say this hypothetical baseball player does now, or teaches people now, or maybe doesn't do very well, and at this time they might be a superstar baseball player, but they're not really good at doing something, and they're known for that. And that coach say, "Oh yeah, well, never really could do it then either. I don't know what that was, and I tried real hard." It's just little things like that. You're really getting into the in-depth layers of this person, because you're bringing in people. You're looking for a couple, at least a few people, the very least a few people, to get into the different levels of this person to help. So you're showing people how this person's evolved and how they've developed into who they've developed. Right? And these are all these things that and these other people that they're mentioning, they're called secondary sources. So you talk to them, then you try and get those other people, if you can, to sit down with them to tell the because when you're doing a profile, it's going to be in depth, and you're going to have a little time to do it. So, and you'll talk to the secondary sources, and that's from the first interview. And then you've got your second interview. When you do that, when you're looking in your secondary sources, you talk to them, and then you're gonna get that other information, just like I said, and then you're gonna talk about what they saw, and then when you're done, if there's any inconsistencies with one story, then with them, you go back to the original, the person that you're talking to again, the main person you're focusing on, the personality profile. Say, yeah, they said it happened this way, and sometimes, oh no, yeah, you're right there, and they might have, and then there might be more to it. You might be able to dig a little deeper in for those details. And this is also, so you can confirm things and deny things and find some things out uh, when you're talking to this when you're talking to them for the second time. Now they also mentioned a third interview. You may not get a third interview, um, and you might have to do what they tell you to do in the third interview and the second interview, and that would be kind of like paying attention to what they're wearing, how they do things, what they're it could be what they're eating or drinking, or what superficial things, well, how they keep their hair, how they dress, because you've been around them a couple of times, and it also gives you physical things to describe within this profile, because you're getting a feel of who this person is, outside of the what you normally see them as. And they've been with you a few times, and so this really kind of gives, and also you can see how they communicate with you, how they deal with others, and that's the things you'll be looking for if you have the opportunity of a third interview for this full profile. And between all those different interviews, talking to your secondary sources, paying attention to what they're wearing, what they're eating, whatever they have, maybe jewelry they're wearing or anything like that, and there might be stories with that. You're going to really get the inside of who this person is, because people like reading about it. And then it comes to is this big story worth it? So what does that mean? They basically you have to think of what are the things that when you're dealing with the big story. Okay, if it's a big story, there's some questions that you should ask. If I'm going to be telling this big story, is it worth it? And lots of times when you're a journalist, sometimes people are, I don't want to go with the big story. I like with my small stories, and I'm kind of happy with that. It could be data related, open records requests. Sometimes it can take up time, and you don't want to miss out on other things. But there's some questions that you should ask for that when you're looking at it. All right. First of all, does it answer a question? All right. Basically, your best investigative pieces and data-related stories, they answer a question. You could talk about crime or salaries, but it doesn't really answer a question. You want to answer questions that will explain something. That's first and foremost. Does it break new ground? Has this never been done before? Lots of all stories. It seems like every story has been done, but there's offshoots of other stories that may have never been covered in a certain way. Are you doing something that's original? Are you looking into something that might be related to something that's done before, but not quite in this way? And that brings importance to that story as well. Does it have potential for impact? You know, we want people to care about what we're writing. So it goes back to how is it impacting your audience? Does it have an impact? Well, what you talk about positively impact people because you shined a light on something. Is there something that will change things because you did that? So when you're talking about is this big story worth it? Is it going to impact in some way because of why you did this? How does it affect people? Or if people are going to care about it because they're seeing what you're talking about is affecting them, and hopefully in a positive manner, because then they're going to, this person's really looking out for us. And because of their work, these positive things have happened because you told the story, because you dug, because you looked in it, because you're constantly looking for things, because you always have your head on a pivot and always kind of paying attention to what's going on, even in the course of when you're doing your job. And it can be difficult sometimes, but that's part of it. It doesn't have a point. Well, what's the entire point to it? And they say, here's a tip: keep making yourself write down a sentence or two explaining the story. What is the story? What is the news? And if you can't do it in a couple sentences, you need to go back to work. Is this a story? And this is all part of it. Is this thing a story worth writing? And it's not easy being a journalist. Lots of homework, lots of thinking outside the norm, and just not repeating what people are saying and just going through the routine. In this day and age, it's tougher than ever before with dwindling staffs and resources. Even though we've got these monster corporations that own just about everything, which probably else doesn't help because you probably have dwindling sources. But I mean, you still, if you're going to be a journalist and not just a minor bird repeating things that people say, just okay, here's your news. A journalist really digs and really looks for the stories and what matters to people. And you might find it difficult, and it could be just in general, or there might not be a true commitment to it, or people just want you to get done what you want to get done, so they have content. A real journalist digs, and a real journalist cares about getting that story, putting it out, and trying to make the world a little bit better place because you've been there and because you did it. That's what being a journalist is, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that. And it's easy to fall within that because you have a job to do, and when the day's over, it's just easier to forget about it. But good journalists care about the story. Good journalists care about serving the people that they read, so they're informed. People have forgotten a lot about that. And that hopefully maybe the things that I'm telling you will push you more towards that way. Other things you should understand: no FOI laws, Freedom of Information Act, FOIA laws. Understanding that, especially when you're dealing with government and stuff like that, and policies and stuff, that stuff is usually it's free access, and it has to be specifically written in a certain way, and it's got to be made accessible. And lots of times they don't want you to know about it because a lot of times you're probably doing something wrong, or they just want people to not look too deeply, and it's become easier because of lack of news sources and lack of people really trying, because they're just getting caught up in the everyday, we got a story, go deeper. But I mean, it's all out there for you. Freedom of Information Act, just know the laws of your state and federal, and paying attention to all that. Also, things called sunshine laws when you're dealing with state meetings and records for that. It's all out there. That's the scary part about it. It's not that hard to find. It's sometimes it takes a little bit of digging, and a lot of times, especially when you're dealing with government bureaucracies, they're really good at burying things or not letting people know and advertising that these things are out there, but they are out there, and by law they're supposed to be there. It's just sometimes it's harder to find them than it really should be. But being a good journalist, you should know that this stuff is out there and it needs to be reported on. And sometimes they find out, hey, well, where did this go into effect? And nobody knew about it. But it still has to be publicly put into a public record. But sometimes it's buried in ways that, though it's still public, it's kind of hard to navigate. And it's your responsibility as a journalist to know how, the laws of a given area, what's allowed, what's not, what is public. A lot of stuff's public. You'd be surprised what is public, but you don't hear about it. And part of it comes back to that outlets. It could be corporate interests on coverage of some sort. It could be personal bias interests or not fitting a certain niche or brand. And that's not what journalism is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about getting the story out there, telling the truth, regardless of that. Like I said, it's too much to talk about. There's so many layers to it. People don't want to hear about it. It hurts my head. But if you're going to be journalists, be real journalists, and don't be phony journalists just doing a job for some money and say I'm a journalist even though you're not really doing any real good and you might be ignoring things that need to be talked about because, well, oh, I like that person. I don't care if you like that person. If they're doing something wrong, they need to be held accountable for it, period. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's supposed to be. And I'm sorry to say it. More and more it seems it's gone the other way. And we have a lot of the problems and ignorance in the world that we do have. It's kind of scary. But maybe if you kind of like push it and start a new way and do the way it's supposed to do, and enough people get a hold of it and start following that, might have a better place. Big three. Things you should think about. All right. Anything can lead you to a story. Ask why about things you see. All right. Focus on the people. Always be nice. Be nice. Don't be a jerk. Don't be an egomaniac. Because you have to make connections. You have to make sources. Sources are your lifeblood, or you're not going to be a journalist. You're not going to get any stories. You're just going to have to get out of your comfort zone. Okay. Don't be afraid to dig. It takes time. All right, when you're being a journalist, all these things, it's a lot of work, yeah. And there's lots of things you got to work on, from writing and understanding and the sources and the places you need to go. And being a journalist is a lot of work, and a lot of times it's not glorious work. You're looked down upon a lot, especially these days. But there's important work to do, and it's important you be a good journalist by being honest, by making sure you're paying attention to your audience and what they need to know, and getting good stories. That's not only informationally, it entertains and has positive impact, and hopefully you make a better world for this place. That's pretty much it. I hope you got something out of that. And just keep working on stuff, and we'll get through this semester. All right? That's chapter 8. Thanks. Bye.